welcome. Thank you to each and every one of you for making the time to be with us here this afternoon. It means so much to us. My name is Kate Walker. I'm the chair of the board of Velo Canada Bikes. And with me is Samuel Benoit, the executive director of Velo Canada Bikes, many board members, and of course, all of you who are members, supporters, cycling enthusiasts. It's so great to see so many of you in the room here today. I'd now like to provide a land acknowledgement. I wish to acknowledge the land on which Velo Canada Bikes operates. Velo Canada Bikes office is currently located on the traditional lands of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and we collaborate with people and organizations that are located all across Turtle Island. Turtle Island is the traditional land of many Indigenous peoples and has been so for thousands of years. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live on this land. Recognizing that Truth and Reconciliation Day is coming up on September 30th, we want to acknowledge that we are working in the spirit of good relations. I would now like to call this meeting to order at 2:09 p.m. Eastern Time. Sarah, let me know if there's any issues. I'm going to assume you're good, and we'll move forward from there. Thank you to Sarah Kirk, our board member, I should say Dr. Sarah Kirk, who is kindly taking minutes for this meeting. And now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Tom Flood. Tom is a communications professional who has worked in marketing and advertising for over 20 years with a wide range of clients, including corporate brand work for automotive manufacturers. His career took a new direction when he brought his kids to school on their bikes and noticed the serious imbalance in our shared spaces. Over the last 5 years, through his company, Rovelo Creative, Tom has been helping organizations both in and outside the advocacy space to develop their brands, creative, and messaging to ensure their positioning and communications resonate with their audience. Tom uses creative content and striking imagery to reframe the mainstream narrative around road safety, road violence, and active transportation. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you very much. Yeah, really excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me to this today. I'm going to share my screen and just kind of continue on. And if there's an issue, just please, raise your hand with anything audio, video, that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to do this right now. Share this. And let's see, I hope everyone can see this. So I'm going to chat a little bit on communications, framing, and kind of how we approach the discussion around active transportation, road safety, and road violence. Because to me, there's a little bit of a disconnect between the on-street realities that a lot of us face on our streets and our shared spaces, and then kind of the way we talk about it. I'll first give a little bit of a background on me and my kind of advocacy journey into this space, which is a little strange. And before I start, I'd like to let people know that I come at this, as Kate mentioned, from a marketing perspective. I don't come from transportation. I don't come from engineering, planning, academia. I think most people in this room today probably have a better understanding of a lot of these things than I do. And secondly, is that I come at this from being a parent who just really wanted to get their kids to school safely and independently, either walking or biking. So that's really what's kind of informed my perspective and shaped how I see things in this space. So, oh geez, here, there we go. There is me. I grew up in the suburbs. Active transportation was not a thing for us. The bike was always for fun. It was never really for function. We weren't, a family that took our bikes to go to the grocery store or go to do errands. It was really just for, ripping around with your friends. It wasn't until I moved to the city, which was Toronto at the time when I got older, that I really discovered the bike as a tool. Never a political statement. It was always just, for me, the best way to get around, getting to bars, shows, restaurants, and to work. But again, it wasn't some sort of statement I was making in, my identity by any means. Oh, I got to click here. So shortly after I began a career in advertising, started at a larger agency at the bottom, kind of worked my way through the agency ladder and ended up working on some automotive accounts. And if you see that image there, that's a really old shot of me, and it says putting bums in trucks one hootenanny at a time. So it's kind of a far cry for where I'm at today, but this is where I kind of got started in the advertising world. And I think it's strange because I was spending, 10 to 15 minutes a day cycling or walking into work, going back from work, and then spending, 10 to 12 hours a day developing with teams content and creative and strategies, kind of, perpetuating the very issues that we were facing on the streets every single day. And it's something that, like, I think it's important to remember when I speak with people. Not everyone's had their real moment of clarity or awakening in this space. I mean, I didn't see it, and I was right, in the middle of it. So for me, the light bulb went off when I took these two kids, who are my kids. This is quite a while ago now, on their bikes to school and daycare for the very first time. I truly couldn't believe how dangerous it was just to move them from our home to their school. Again, I had no background in this space at all. I just remember thinking, how is this okay with everybody? This is completely absurd. Started following city council a little bit more, something again I'd never had any interest in or had done previously. And then just remember kind of hearing some of the rhetoric being thrown around our city council anytime any sort of active transportation, a stop sign, a bike lane, a speed bump came up. It was like some sort of apocalyptic nightmare that was gonna happen to this street. And something that really, really stuck with me was, you know, getting labeled as some sort of anti-car radical when all I wanted was to get my kids, everyone's kids, safe to and from school. And again, something I thought wasn't going to be divisive or polarizing turned out to be the complete opposite. But again, the fact that wanting to get, kids safely to school, walking and biking was considered radical, that really kind of lit a fire under me because I felt I was so far from what radical actually meant. So, like everybody else, took to social media to vent on our frustrations, but we were just venting as very, very casual bike riders and walkers to school. There was no sort of master plan here, just a place to vent and a place to vent on, some of the absurdity that we were seeing that was not only, accepted, but protected and tried to be maintained essentially. So as time goes by, frustrations start to mount, get a little bit more involved with community organizing, protests, rallies, things I'm sure that many people that are here today have been a part of. Was then approached by a group in New York to write an article about what the Vision Zero movement could learn from car commercials. So for me, it was really an opportunity to write about something I knew a little bit about, which was the marketing side of things, and kind of dovetail it with something I was just learning about, which was our streets, shared spaces, Vision Zero, all these things that a lot of people in this room today, again, know so much about, but it was very new to me. But, really got me thinking about kind of branding in this space and communications in this space at every level and kind of with every word and how it's approached. So started to develop things that I thought would, highlight some of the absurdity that we were experiencing and that had been normalized on our streets and kind of easily digestible pieces of content, static posters or videos. Began to connect with lots of different people in this space. Some are who are here today, who are much smarter than me and know a lot more about this world than I did, and quickly realized how common some of these themes were, both kind of locally, provincially, nationally, and internationally. Some of these messages started to, jump from social media into the real world in the form of, posters, stickers, T-shirts, and even billboards that just kind of went up quite recently in Vancouver with the people at Vision Zero Vancouver. It's so that's a bit of a background on me and how I ended up in this space. And it still feels really, really strange because this all kind of started thinking, wouldn't it be fun to bike my kids to school one morning, and then it all kind of went sideways. So we'll get into a little positioning now. So communicating for safety for those outside of the car has been, it hasn't been great. It's been terrible at times. And again, of course, there's exceptions to the rule, but overall, it's kind of some of those more backwards and weaker efforts that, really help perpetuate a campaign to, vilify and dehumanize people outside of the car to a certain extent. And that to me has built a bit of a narrative in the mainstream consciousness that really helps shape, how people are outside of the car are seen. I mean, if you think about people on bicycles, you're often, some sort of ridiculous stereotype. You're a anti-car radical or a lycra-clad road warrior, or granola hippie. You can kind of pick your pejorative poison of this campaign, this kind of false campaign that's been going on for so long. And some of these tropes have kind of permeated into the mainstream, so much so that it's really armed some decision makers with fuel for their rhetoric when you get into city council and discussions and meetings. And again, I kind of highlight that because it's the discussion's been pushed so far that simply a parent wanting their kids to get to school safely, you're framed up as some sort of radical anti-car human, which couldn't be further from the truth for me, and I think a lot of people. So it's an uphill battle, obviously, but I think it's also a really good opportunity to look at how we can rehumanize and reframe people outside of the car. But I think before we do that, it's really good to understand, what's out there, what's the landscape, who's speaking, who holds the mic, and what are people seeing generally when it comes to our streets. So there's a few different players, and the first up is our friends in the automotive world.
We've got a higher octane coursing through our veins. We've got a stronger brotherhood backing us up. We've got a duty to unleash demon, to break out, to go all out, to literally leave our mark on the streets and strips of America. This isn't just a Dodge. This isn't just a Challenger. No, this is the most technologically advanced street legal production drag car ever. We've got a high...
Okay, so to literally leave our mark on the streets and strips of America, it's very intentional. Very intentional language. I mean, this is Dodge. This is one of the worst offenders in this space. But this is it. High octane, race ready vehicles that are actually street legal. This is what, our kids, our community, our loved ones are up against on our streets. Again, this is a bit, extreme. It's Dodge, but really violence, road violence and recklessness has been baked into auto advertising, so deeply that we've become desensitized to it at every single level. Let me just go here. So that's how they're marketed. How about how they're built? Well, this is the Hummer EV. It's 9,000 pounds, 1,000 horsepower, and goes 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds. So it's a total monster. Yes, these are not flooding the street at this point, but it's really, reflective of a trend of our vehicles getting bigger and faster. So we have large vehicles, built for performance, marketed recklessly, and being sold for everyday use. Knowing this, how do we communicate in this safety space? What serious and thoughtful approach as leaders and voices of influence could we take, to combat what's going on in our streets? How could we communicate the gravity of the situation?
So, put your phones down, look both ways before crossing.
Right? With a silly video. It's a total joke, right? They're having a laugh through it. We've seen these all the time. But it's so symbolic to our approach to road safety. We blame and shame the pedestrian, and then we kind of finger wag the driver. They're having a laugh through it. And I think one reason, and to me it has everything to do with thoughtfulness and awareness. I think one reason that a lot of people don't take road violence seriously is because we refuse to talk about it seriously. You think about how this plays into the discussion, alongside kind of violent auto marketing, or the realities of the streets that our kids, our families, our loved ones have to use every single day. So that's one small kind of state police department. How would, say, a larger governmental agency kind of communicate in this space? What kind of language would they use to, treat this issue that really, plagues our streets? It's, steals our children, and I'm not being hyperbolic, destroys on a mass scale. What kind of thought-provoking content, would they share to rally the public for the change so desperately needed on our streets? So since the Stone Age, focusing on the road is all you should be yabba dabba doing when car emoji. Now, if you guessed leveraging the live-action Flintstones film from 1994, you would have been right. And now it's not funny at all. Is that I can't believe it to keep clarifying this. 1.35 million people are killed every year on our roads. The lasting impact and the danger of the driver that it presents to everybody, the margin of error is so small, and the cost is so high. And yet this is still how we communicate in this space. This is Jude Strickland. This is an 11-year-old boy who was killed in Hamilton a few years ago by a driver. He was walking home from school in a crosswalk. with a light, with the crossing guard, and a driver blew through and killed him. You know, I show a face because I think it's really important to rehumanize what's happening on our streets. You know, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this or have a connection to someone who's been affected by road violence. You think of his family, other families, and every family that's been affected by road violence, right? And then you think about how we, sorry, I gotta go back here, how we talk about it. It's grotesque, it's thoughtless, and it's cruel, you know, much like our streets. And there's such a disconnect between the violence that exists on our street and the way we talk about it. And to me, that's what I think is important to address and important to try to kind of cut through some of the noise in this space. I'm not saying road violence is due to, you know, one bad governmental agency tweet, one bad police video, you know, one, you know, reckless auto ad, one misinformed counselor, but it's the compounding effect of all of these things year over year over year over year that I think that builds a narrative that isn't appreciative of the severity of the situation, which then I think translates into problematic solutions. It's time we start talking about road violence and road safety and active transportation seriously with every single word. So I mentioned how absurdity is what woke me up. And I think for many, they just haven't had their moment of clarity. And I think it's due to the incredible job we've done, you know, normalizing the imbalance on our streets. What do I mean by absurd? Well, needing nonprofit organizations to convince adults in leadership positions that kids should be able to walk and ride safely to school is absurd. I'm really happy we have these organizations doing the hard work, but it's absurd we need that. Our advertising is absolutely absurd. You know, we've seen some of it. What on the screen, dominating from every angle. What are you dominating? We all know where we build in standard safety and where we don't. We all know the improvements to the occupants inside the vehicle. What are we really doing for everybody outside the vehicle? You know, and once you see it, you kind of can't unsee what our streets are and what have they become. You know, what our kids have lost for the convenience, perceived convenience of the driver. You know, these fundamental freedoms and joys have been stolen from our kids for one thing and one thing only. Who we blame is absurd. Both are wearing black in this picture. If there is a crash, pretty sure the reporting will be that the person on the bicycle was wearing dark clothes, right? You see enough of these reports. They were looking at their phone. They had their hood up, right? They didn't have a neon vest on. You know, asking our kids to protect themselves when we don't do enough to protect them is absurd. You know, we know there's never going to be a bell loud enough, a helmet strong enough, clothing bright enough to make up for weak leadership and poor infrastructure. You know, we have walk to school days. Again, walk and bike to school days are great, but I can't believe we have to have special days for it. Asking our kids to wave flags or anybody wave flags crossing the street is absurd. What if one of the children, you know, waved it the wrong way, didn't put it high enough, or God forbid, dropped it? You know, who's at fault now? Sorry. So knowing all this, I think it's important to try and reshape the narrative in ways that people can understand and connect to by challenging some of the current perceptions. I'm going to show a PSA that was done here in Canada, and then we'll have a quick chat about that as soon as it's done. Oh, let's see. Sorry, technical difficulties here. Okay. There. Sorry. Okay. So we'll just walk through kind of what happened in that video. So a kid puts on headphones, which is completely normal, completely fine. We have headphones. teen being a teen. Then the kid puts their hood up, which again, completely normal, totally legal. Every single teen and tween I know has a hood. Hoodies are everywhere. This is literally what those hoods are for, to go up. Then this teen or kid pushes the crosswalk button. This could be the ultimate amazing pedestrian, literally doing everything textbook that we need them to do. Pushes the button, waits for the lights to flash. Again, textbook, ultimate amazing pedestrian. Crosses in the middle of the crosswalk, perfectly visible. Couldn't stand out anymore, if you ask me. Then we have a driver who looks down at their phone. Not good, distracted. The driver reaches for their phone. Again, completely distracted, not even looking at the road. The driver picks up the phone and looks at it while they're operating the car. Again, completely illegal. You cannot be doing this, completely distracted. Then the driver almost hits this child who was doing nothing wrong. And the message is pedestrian safety is a two-way street. A child walks through a crosswalk and a distracted driver almost hits them, and pedestrian safety is a two-way street. This is kind of classic victim blaming content, but we become so used to seeing this type of messaging, become somewhat desensitized to it. So when you see these things over and over and over, our initial thoughts when there are crashes is, what did the pedestrian do wrong? What did the cyclist do wrong? So I'm going to play an updated version of this that I just kind of remixed slightly using the same elements that they had in this piece. And again, it's not perfect by any means, but it's just a way to show how we can look at something with a bit of a different filter. So the narrative is, again, this isn't perfect by any means, but the narrative has changed. The blame has been redirected, and just kind of highlighted what we went through and kind of walking through the video. It's not hard or complicated, but it takes some thoughtfulness, I think, and awareness of the landscape and the situation, just showing how we can present things a little bit differently. So to me, it's really about kind of exposing our standard communications for what they are and trying to reframe the discussion when we get the opportunity. And we can use some basic communication tools in this space that, typically advertisers have been using forever. Keep things simple, keep things emotional, and try to keep things relatable for people so they can understand what we're talking about or what the point we're trying to get across is all about. Again, essentially doing what advertisers have done forever. So I'm going to show one more piece that, again, just offers a bit of a different perspective or a different framing of a standard kind of auto ad. So for me, as communicators in this space and a kind of authoritative voices out there, I think we really need to start talking about road safety and road violence with the weight that it deserves, to wake people up to some of the absurdity that we've normalized. And for our shared space, I think it's really important to really reframe in ways that people can understand and connect to. So I really believe that people can see things differently. Again, this is a massive uphill battle, but I saw things differently, and I had my moment. I think it's about trying to find those moments for people that haven't had their moment of clarity yet. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for having me here today. Really, really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tom. That was so inspiring, so important, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today. I can see from the audience, the reactions, the chat, people, I think, agree with me. That was just a fantastic presentation.